The council chamber of the Empire stretched high above the marble floors, its walls decorated with banners from 1,000 conquered worlds. Ambassador stood alone in the center of the vast room, surrounded by alien faces that looked down at him with barely hidden contempt. He held a data pad in his hand, but he did not need to look at it. He had memorized every word of the message he was about to deliver. "Supreme Commander," began, his voice steady and clear. "I come before this council with an official declaration from the United Earth Government. Effective immediately, all Terran space is closed to foreign vessels. Any ship that crosses our designated boundaries will be considered an act of war." The council chamber erupted with sounds that had learned to recognize as laughter. It was a harsh, clicking noise that echoed off the high walls. Supreme Commander, a massive creature with dark scales and 4 arms, leaned forward on his throne. His eyes, which glowed with a faint yellow light, fixed on the human ambassador. "You stand before the greatest military power this galaxy has ever known," said, his voice deep and rumbling. "The Empire controls 400 star systems. Our fleets number in the thousands. Our soldiers count in the billions. And you, representing a species that has been in space for barely 2 centuries, dare to issue ultimatums." Did not flinch. He had expected this reaction. "I am not issuing an ultimatum, Supreme Commander. I am delivering a warning. Humanity has established clear boundaries around our territory. We ask only that these boundaries be respected." Another officer, this one wearing the silver armor of the Military Intelligence Division, raised one of his hands. "Supreme Commander, if I may speak." Waved a hand dismissively. "Commander, this is not the time for your cautious reports." "With respect, Supreme Commander," continued anyway, "our intelligence has detected unusual activity in Terran space over the past 18 months. Significant construction projects, military drills that do not match standard human defensive patterns. I believe we should investigate further before making any decisions." Sighs narrowed. "Are you suggesting that we, the Empire, should be afraid of these primates? They control 12 systems. 12. We could crush them with a fraction of our forces." Watch the exchange with careful attention. Commander was the only one in the room who seemed to understand that something had changed. The others saw only numbers and assumed that numbers meant everything. "The humans have won minor victories against pirate factions," another council member said. "This has given them false confidence. They believe themselves stronger than they are." "Exactly," agreed. "And it is time we taught them the truth about their place in this galaxy. Ambassador, you will return to your government with our response. The Empire rejects your demands. To demonstrate our dominance, we will send a battle fleet through your so-called forbidden space. If your forces interfere, they will be destroyed. If your government submits, humanity will become a vassal state under protection. You have one standard cycle to prepare." Took a slow breath. He had hoped it would not come to this, but his government had prepared him for this outcome. "I urge you to reconsider, Supreme Commander. Humanity does not make empty threats. We have established these boundaries for a reason." "The only reason I see," said, rising from his throne, "is human arrogance. You are dismissed, Ambassador. My fleet will depart within the day." Bowed slightly, a gesture of diplomatic courtesy that he did not feel. He turned and walked toward the massive doors of the council chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him, he could hear the council members already discussing which ships to send, how quickly they could crush human resistance, and what terms they would demand in humanity's surrender. As the doors closed behind him, activated his communicator. "To Earth Command, the warning was rejected. They are sending a fleet of 50 ships. Estimated arrival at Terran boundary in 48 hours. The voice that responded belonged to Admiral Hayes, commander of Earth's Defense Forces. "Understood, Ambassador. Return home immediately. We will handle the rest." Looked back at the closed doors of the council chamber one last time. "Admiral, they have no idea what they are walking into." "That is the point, Ambassador," Hayes replied. "That is exactly the point." 3,000 light-years away, Admiral Hayes stood on the command deck of Sentinel Station, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. The station hung in space at the edge of Terran territory, surrounded by dozens of smaller platforms that appeared to be simple weapons emplacements. But Hayes knew what they really were, and soon they would know too. "Admiral, we are detecting the fleet," Captain Lisa Morgan reported from her position at the sensor station. 50 warships in standard battle formation. They will reach the Terran boundary in approximately 6 hours. Hayes nodded. Deploy all defense platforms to ready status. Make sure the suppression field generators are fully charged. I want every system tested and confirmed operational. Lisa turned in her chair to face him. Admiral, they still have time to turn back. Should we send another warning? No, Hayes said quietly. We gave them fair warning. Ambassador made our position clear. If we warn them again now, they will see it as weakness. They will think we are afraid to follow through. He paused, studying the moving dots on the tactical display that represented the approaching fleet. Humanity has spent 18 months preparing for this moment. We have studied their technology, identified their weaknesses, and built our defenses specifically to counter their strengths. The question was never whether we could stop them. The question was whether they would be foolish enough to test us. And now we have our answer, Lisa said. Now we have our answer, Hayes agreed. The hours passed slowly. Hayes watched as the fleet moved closer to the boundary line that humanity had established. He could imagine the scene on their command ships. Officers confident in their superiority, assured of easy victory, perhaps already arguing about who would receive the honor of accepting humanity's surrender. They would learn soon enough. Admiral, the fleet has reached the boundary, Lisa announced. They are crossing into Terran space now. Hayes felt his heart rate increase slightly, but his voice remained calm. Maintain position. Let them come deeper. We want them fully committed before we act. On the tactical display, the 50 ships moved forward in perfect formation. Their fleet commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Fist, and watched the displays with satisfaction. His fleet of 50 warships had crossed into human space without incident. The humans had not sent any ships to intercept them. They had not even attempted to hail his fleet with threats or warnings. Scan the area for human vessels, ordered his sensor officer. I detect no capital ships within weapons range, Commander, the officer replied. There are several automated platforms ahead, but they appear to be lightly armed, standard defensive installations. Allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were hiding just as he had predicted. They knew they could not stand against military might. This would be a simple show of force, nothing more. Maintain formation and continue to the human colony of New Boston. We will demonstrate power, and these primates will learn to bow before their superiors. His officers acknowledged the order with crisp efficiency. The fleet moved forward, their shields at full strength, their weapons ready to destroy any target foolish enough to challenge them. Had fought in 17 major campaigns during his career. He had defeated enemy fleets 3 times the size of this human navy. This assignment was beneath him, really, but Supreme Commander wanted an experienced officer to handle the humans, would complete the mission quickly and return home to more worthy challenges. That was when everything went wrong. Commander, our faster-than-light drives are shutting down, his engineering officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. All power to the FTL systems is dropping to 0. Turned sharply. What? Check for equipment failure, run full diagnostics. I am running diagnostics now, Commander. The drives show no mechanical failures. The systems are simply not responding to commands. It is as if something is preventing them from functioning. Before could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the bridge. Commander, our weapons systems are experiencing power fluctuations, another officer called out. Targeting computers are offline. Shield generators are operating at only 40% capacity. Felt a cold sensation in his chest. This was not equipment failure. This was enemy action. All ships report status immediately. The responses came back quickly, and each one was worse than the last. Every ship in his fleet was experiencing the same problems. Their faster-than-light drives were completely disabled. Their weapons were barely functional. Their shields were weakened, and they were all dead in space, unable to maneuver. What kind of weapon is this? Demanded. Scan for the source. His sensor officer worked frantically at his console. Commander, those platforms we detected earlier, they are not weapons emplacements. They are emitting some kind of suppression field. The energy signature is unlike anything in our database. It appears to target our power distribution system specifically. Stared at the tactical display, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. The humans had not run away. They had not hidden in fear. They had built a trap, and his entire fleet had walked directly into it. How long to restore systems? Unknown, Commander. Our engineers are attempting to bypass the suppression effect, but the field is adaptive. Every countermeasure we try is neutralized within seconds. Then we fight with what we have, said, forcing steel into his voice. All ships bring whatever weapons remain online to bear, target those platforms, destroy them. But even as he gave the order, new contacts appeared on the sensor display. Human ships, dozens of them, emerging from positions where they had been hiding behind asteroids, debris fields, and even behind the suppression platforms themselves. These were not the heavy cruisers they had expected to face. These ships were smaller, faster, and they moved with deadly purpose. Incoming human vessels, his sensor officer reported. I count 42 ships. They are attack frigates designed for high-speed strikes. Commander Jack Torres sat in the pilot seat of his frigate, the Razor Wind, and felt the familiar rush of combat preparation. His squadron of 12 ships moved in perfect formation, following the attack pattern they had practiced 100 times over the past year. The fleet hung before them, disabled and vulnerable, exactly as Admiral Hayes had promised. All squadrons, this is Torres, he transmitted to the other human ships. Target propulsion systems first. We want to make sure they cannot escape once we begin. Fire on my mark. His weapons officer confirmed target lock. Jack took one breath, remembering all the training that had led to this moment, then gave the command. All squadrons engage. The human frigates opened fire as one, their weapons cutting through space toward the crippled warships. They tried to return fire, but their targeting systems were too damaged to achieve accurate locks. Their shots went wide or struck harmlessly against the shields of ships that were too fast and too agile to hit with degraded systems. Jack watched as his missiles struck home, destroying the engine sections of a cruiser. Around him, other human ships were achieving similar successes. This was not a battle. This was a systematic dismantling of an enemy force that could not defend itself properly. Flagship is hailing us, his communications officer reported. Put it through, Jack ordered. The face of an officer appeared on his screen. The alien's scales were dark with what Jack had learned to recognize as stress. Human commander, I am fleet commander. I request immediate ceasefire negotiations. Jack shook his head. I am Captain Jack Torres, and I am not authorized to negotiate. However, I can transmit surrender terms. Power down all remaining weapons. Evacuate your crews to escape pods. We will recover your personnel and provide medical treatment, but your ships are forfeit. Surrender, his voice carried shock and fury. Do not surrender to inferior species. We will fight to the last ship. Then you will die to the last ship, Jack said bluntly. Commander, look at your situation. Your fleet is disabled. Your ships cannot maneuver or fight effectively. We have you completely surrounded. We have offered you honorable terms. Take them, or we will destroy every vessel in your fleet. You have 60 seconds to decide. The communication cut off. Jack waited, watching the tactical display. 30 seconds passed. 45. He was about to give the order to resume the attack when his communications officer spoke again. Captain, we are receiving individual surrender requests from several ships. They are powering down weapons and beginning crew evacuations. But not all of them surrendered. 15 commanders among them refused to accept defeat. They continued trying to fight with damaged weapons and failing systems. Jack gave his pilots clear orders. They targeted those ships with precision strikes, destroying them quickly to minimize the chance of human casualties. 6 hours after entering Terran space, the fleet was gone. 48 ships destroyed. 2 ships captured intact after their crews evacuated, and over 8,000 personnel floating in escape pods waiting for rescue. Admiral Hayes appeared on Jack's communication screen. Well done, Captain Torres. Begin recovery operations immediately. I want every survivor brought to our medical facilities. Treat them with full honors. Understood, Admiral, Jack replied. What about the captured ships? We are sending engineering teams to study them. After we have learned what we can, we will return them to the Empire along with their crews. Make sure our guests understand that they were treated well. Some of them will speak about their experience when they return home. Jack understood the strategy. Humanity was sending a message, but not just a message of military strength. They were also sending a message about honor and mercy. 2 days later, the captured ships crossed back into Imperial space with their crews aboard, and a message from Admiral Hayes playing on a continuous loop. Had recorded it personally, speaking directly to the High Command. Supreme Commander, we warned you that Terran space was forbidden. You Supreme Commander smashed his fist against the table in the war room, creating a dent in the metal surface. Around him, the members of the High Command sat in uncomfortable silence. The footage from the destroyed fleet played on the wall screens, showing warships being systematically destroyed by human forces. Unacceptable, growled. The humans humiliated us. They destroyed 50 of our finest ships and sent the survivors home like prisoners being released from captivity. This cannot stand. Grand Admiral, the most decorated military commander in the Empire's history, leaned forward. Supreme Commander, I request permission to mobilize 3 full battle fleets, over 300 ships. We will attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The humans cannot defend against such overwhelming force. Commander, who had been silent throughout most of the meeting, finally spoke. Grand Admiral, with respect, we should consider why the first attack failed so completely. The humans did not defeat our fleet through superior numbers or firepower. They defeated us through preparation and intelligence. They studied our technology and built specific countermeasures. Are you suggesting we should be afraid? Demanded. I am suggesting we should be smart, replied. Our scientists have analyzed the suppression field the humans used. They believe they can develop countermeasures, but it will take time. We should wait until those countermeasures are ready before launching another attack. Shook his head. We do not have time. Every day we wait, our enemies grow bolder. Subject species throughout the Empire are watching. If we appear weak, if we allow this defeat to go unanswered, we will face rebellions on a dozen worlds. No, Grand Admiral will lead the attack immediately. Use whatever strategy you deem necessary, but bring me human surrender. Bowed his head in acknowledgement. It will be done, Supreme Commander. I have already ordered reconnaissance drones to scout human territory. We will find their weaknesses and exploit them. 3 weeks later, on a human intelligence station hidden in neutral space, Agent Bradford reviewed the latest reports with growing concern. She was young for her position, only 32 years old, but she had built an intelligence network that reached deep into territory. Admiral Hayes, we have a problem, said into her secure communication link. My sources inside the merchant guilds confirm that Grand Admiral is planning a major offensive. 300 ships attacking from multiple vectors. They intend to overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers. On the screen, Admiral Hayes nodded calmly. When will they attack? Our estimates put it at 2 weeks, possibly less. They are still developing countermeasures to our suppression technology, but has ordered the attack to proceed regardless. Do we know their strategy? Pulled up a tactical map. My source provided detailed fleet movements. Plans to hit our core systems with his main force while sending secondary fleets to capture our outer colonies at New Boston and Meridian Station. He believes we have concentrated our defenses around Earth and the core systems, leaving the colonies vulnerable. Hayes was quiet for a moment, studying the map. Could see him thinking, calculating. Finally, he spoke. Agent Bradford, your intelligence has been invaluable, but I need to ask you to do something difficult. I need you to allow certain information to reach the... Specifically, I need them to see that we are withdrawing forces from New Boston and Meridian Station. Can you arrange that? Understood immediately. You want them to think the colonies are abandoned. You are setting another trap. They expect us to defend our territory conventionally, Hayes said. They expect us to put our strongest defenses around our most valuable assets. We need to show them that their assumptions are wrong, just as we did with their first fleet. Can you do it? I can do it, confirmed. Give me 3 days. True to her word, carefully leaked information through her network of contacts. She made sure that intelligence officers heard reports of human ships withdrawing from the outer colonies. She arranged for reconnaissance drones to observe human vessels moving toward the core systems. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity was consolidating its forces in a defensive posture, abandoning the colonies to save Earth. Grand Admiral reviewed the intelligence reports with satisfaction. The humans are afraid. They know they cannot defend everything, so they are pulling back to protect their. This gives us the opportunity we need. Grand Admiral, this could be another trap, one of his advisors cautioned. Of course it could be a trap, agreed. But it could also be genuine, and if it is genuine, we cannot waste this opportunity. We will proceed with the attack as planned. 60 ships to secure New Boston, 60 ships to secure Meridian Station. The remaining forces will engage the human fleet at their core systems. Even if the colonies are traps, we have enough ships to absorb the losses and continue the campaign. 2 weeks later, the fleet struck. The attack on the core systems met fierce resistance, exactly as expected. Human ships fought with skill and determination, using the home field advantage to maximum effect. But at New Boston and Meridian Station, the forces found almost no opposition. A few automated defense platforms fired token shots, then went silent. The colonies appeared to be genuinely abandoned. "All ships begin landing operations," the commander at New Boston transmitted. "Secure all facilities. We will use this base to launch attacks deeper into human territory." As the ships moved into position around the colony, engineering teams began preparing to board the facilities. They scanned for traps, for hidden weapons, for any sign of human deception. They found nothing suspicious. The colony was simply empty. That was when Captain Lisa Morgan, watching from Sentinel Station 3 light towers away, pressed a single button. The colony's fusion reactors had been modified over the past 3 weeks. Human engineers had converted them into massive electromagnetic pulse generators, each one powerful enough to disable every electronic system within light minutes of range. The modifications were hidden deep within the reactor cores where casual scans would not detect them. When Lisa activated the trigger signal, both reactors went critical simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from New Boston was like a small star being born and dying in the same instant. It expanded outward at the speed of light, invisible but devastating. Every ship in the area was struck before their sensors could even register the threat. At Meridian Station, the same scenario played out with identical results. In less than a second, 120 warships became floating debris. Their power systems were fried beyond any hope of repair. Their life support systems failed. Their communication systems died. The crews survived, but they were trapped in dead metal coffins drifting through space. Grand Admiral received the reports from his flagship, and for the first time in his long military career, he felt genuine fear. 120 ships, gone. Not destroyed in glorious battle, but simply turned into useless metal by an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. "Recall all forces," he ordered, his voice barely controlled. "Full retreat to Imperial space, immediately." But even as his fleet began to withdraw, human rescue ships were already moving toward the disabled vessels. Within hours, evacuation operations were. Human medical teams boarded the dead ships, provided emergency life support, and transferred personnel to human vessels. The crews expected to be treated as prisoners, perhaps even executed. Instead, they found themselves in clean medical facilities, receiving food, water, and medical care. Human doctors treated their injuries. Human officers spoke to them with respect. One young officer found himself sharing a recovery room with 3 other members of his crew. A human nurse, a woman named Rachel, checked their vital signs and made sure they were comfortable. "Why are you doing this?" asked her in broken human language. "We came to conquer your worlds. We would have killed your people. Why do you treat us with kindness?" Rachel looked at him with patient eyes. "Because you are people, same as us. You followed orders from your commanders. You did what you thought was right. The war is between governments, not between you and me. While you are here, you are under our protection. We will return you to your people when it is safe to do so." Did not understand. In the Empire, defeated enemies were either enslaved or killed. Mercy was seen as weakness. But these humans showed mercy while simultaneously demonstrating overwhelming military superiority. It made no sense according to everything he had been taught. Back in the capital, Commander stood before the High Command with a detailed report. "Supreme Commander, the total losses from both campaigns now exceed 170 ships, nearly a quarter of our active fleet. The humans have achieved this without engaging in a single conventional battle. They have not invaded our territory. They have not attacked our colonies. They have simply made their own space impassable to our forces." "Then we will develop new technology," insisted. "We will build ships that can resist their countermeasures." "That will take years," said quietly. "And during those years, what happens to the Empire? We have already seen unrest in several subject systems. Our economy is strained from the military expenditures. Supreme Commander, I must speak plainly. This war is unwinnable." Emergency session of the High Command lasted for 6 hours. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. 3 subject systems had declared independence. Trade routes were being attacked by pirates who no longer feared retaliation. The military was divided, with younger officers questioning the leadership of Supreme Commander. Commander watched as paced back and forth, his forearms clenched in frustration. The Supreme Commander had aged visibly over the past weeks. The scales around his eyes were pale with stress. "We cannot accept defeat from these humans," said for perhaps the 100th time. "The Empire has stood for 3,000 years. We have conquered every enemy we have faced. If we surrender now, everything our ancestors built will crumble." Grand Admiral, recently returned from the disastrous campaign, spoke carefully. "Supreme Commander, perhaps we should consider negotiations. The humans have stated they only want their boundaries respected. If we agree to their terms, we can rebuild our strength and restore order to the Empire." "No," said sharply. "Negotiations would be seen as surrender. We need a decisive victory, something that will prove supremacy beyond question." He turned to face the War Council. "I am authorizing the deployment of the—" The room fell silent. There was the Empire's ultimate weapon, a dreadnought-class vessel larger than most space stations. Its weapons could render entire planets uninhabitable. It had been used only twice in the Empire's history, both times to crush rebellions that threatened the stability of rule. "Supreme Commander," said slowly, "though was designed to strike at fixed targets, planets that cannot run away. If we send it against Earth itself, we will be committing genocide. The entire galaxy will turn against us." "Then we will not announce our intentions," replied. "They will take a circuitous route around Terran space, avoiding human defenses entirely. It will strike directly at Earth before the humans can react. When there is destroyed, their resistance will collapse. We will offer the survivors a choice: submit to rule or watch as we destroy their colony worlds one by one." Started to object again, but raised a hand. "The decision is made. Grand Admiral, you will command the operation personally. Take the remaining fleet as escort. Depart within the day." Commander Greg Palmer floated in his reconnaissance ship, watching the sensor displays with growing alarm. His vessel was designed for long-range observation, equipped with passive sensors that could detect ship movements from incredible distances. For the past week, he had been tracking unusual activity near their shipyards. Now he understood why. The massive dreadnought that served as the symbol of military might was leaving its dock, and it was not alone. The remaining fleet, nearly 200 ships, formed an escort around it. Greg immediately transmitted an encrypted message to Earth Command. "Palmer to Admiral Hayes, priority alert. The is moving. I am tracking approximately 200 ships in escort formation. Current trajectory is not toward Terran space. Repeat, they are not heading toward our territory. Analyzing course now." He worked quickly, calculating the fleet's heading based on their initial vector. When the computer provided the answer, his blood ran cold. "Admiral, I have confirmed their destination. They are taking a long route around our defenses. Estimated target is Earth itself. Arrival time, 3 weeks." On Earth, in the command center deep beneath the surface, Admiral Hayes listened to the report with a sinking feeling in his chest. He had hoped they would see reason after 2 crushing defeats. Instead, they were making a desperate gamble that could cost billions of lives. "Call an emergency session of the civilian leadership," Hayes ordered. "I need to speak with President Foster immediately." 2 hours later, Hayes stood in a secure conference room with President Foster, Secretary of Defense Cooper, and a dozen other high-ranking officials. The holographic display showed the projected course of and its fleet. "Can our defenses stop this ship?" President Foster asked. Hayes shook his head. "No, Madam President. The is too large and too heavily armored. Our suppression fields were designed to disable standard vessels. A dreadnought of this size would require a field generator 10 times more powerful than anything we have built, and we do not have 3 weeks to construct one." "What about evacuation?" Secretary Cooper suggested. "We could move civilians off Earth to the colonies." "We have 3 weeks and transport capacity for perhaps 1 million people," Hayes replied. "Earth has a population of 8 billion. We could not evacuate even a fraction of them in time." The room fell silent. Every person present understood what they were facing. Either they found a way to stop or Earth would be destroyed. "What options do we have?" Foster asked quietly. Hayes pulled up another display. "We have been working on prototype vessels using reverse-engineered technology. faster-than-light drives that match or exceed their capabilities, experimental weapon systems. The prototypes are designated Raptors. We have 6 of them operational. 6 ships against 200, Cooper said. Those are terrible odds. The goal would not be to fight their entire fleet, Hayes explained. The goal would be to disable the. If we can destroy or cripple its weapons systems, the fleet would be forced to turn back. But the mission would require the Raptors to intercept the enemy deep in controlled space, with no support and no reinforcements. You are talking about a suicide mission, Foster said. I am talking about the only option we have, Hayes replied. If we do nothing, Earth dies. If we try this, at least we have a chance. Captain Lisa Morgan sat in the briefing room with 5 other ship commanders, listening as Admiral Hayes explained the mission. She had expected this call. When she had heard about she knew that someone would have to go after it. She had known it would be her. The Raptors are fast enough to intercept the enemy fleet in 72 hours, Hayes was saying. Your mission is to disable the weapons systems. You will not be able to destroy a vessel that size, but if you can eliminate its planet-killing capabilities, the mission will be a success. Commander Jack Torres, who had volunteered to join the mission, raised a hand. Admiral, 6 ships cannot take on 200. Even with surprise, we will be outnumbered and... Which is why you will not fight their fleet, Hayes said. You will use stealth to approach undetected. You will strike with everything you have in a single coordinated attack. And then you will attempt to withdraw. I will not lie to you. This mission has an extremely low survival rate. That is why every person on these ships is a volunteer. Lisa looked around the room at the other commanders. She saw determination on their faces, mixed with the appropriate amount of fear. 300 personnel had volunteered for the mission. Only 300 out of thousands who had requested assignment. Every one of them understood the stakes. We launch in 6 hours, Hayes concluded. Use the time to prepare your crews and your ships, and may fortune favor you all. The Raptors departed from Earth's orbital shipyard as scheduled, accelerating to speeds that would have torn apart conventional human vessels. The ships were sleek and fast, built for one specific purpose. Lisa sat in the command chair of the lead ship, the Valiant, and watched the stars streak past. Beside her, Jack Torres reviewed the tactical data. The fleet is maintaining standard formation. The is in the center, protected on all sides. Getting close without being detected will be nearly impossible. Then we will not try to hide during the approach, Lisa said. We will use a different strategy. We will make them think we are something else until the last moment. For 3 days, the Raptors raced through space, pushing their experimental drives to the absolute limit. Twice, they detected patrol ships and had to alter course to avoid detection. The crews worked in shifts, maintaining constant readiness. On the 3rd day, they caught up to the fleet. Lisa studied the massive dreadnought on her sensors. It was even larger than the intelligence reports had suggested. A floating fortress bristling with weapons, surrounded by an escort of warships. All ships, this is Morgan, she transmitted. Begin final approach. Remember the plan. We each target a specific weapons cluster. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and do not stop until those systems are offline or we are destroyed. This is what we came here to do. This is why we volunteered, for Earth, for humanity, for everyone we love. The responses came back quickly, acknowledgments from all 5 other ships. They were ready. Lisa took a deep breath, thinking of all the people on Earth who were depending on this mission. Her family, her friends, billions of people who would never know what happened out here in the darkness of space. All ships, she ordered, attack speed, begin the run. The 6 Raptors accelerated to full power, their experimental drives screaming with energy as they closed the distance to the... The fleet detected them immediately and began to respond, but the human ships were already too close and moving too fast. Lisa picked her target, one of the massive weapon clusters on the dreadnought's hull. All power to forward shields, lock weapons on target, fire everything we have. The Valiant opened fire with every weapon system it possessed. Around her, the other Raptors did the same, each one striking at the specific target they had been assigned. The attacks were devastating, tearing through the shields and armor. But the dreadnought was too large to die easily. Its return fire was massive and overwhelming. Lisa watched as one Raptor, the Swift Justice, took a direct hit and exploded. Then another. The defender vanished in a flash of light. Hull integrity failing, her engineering officer reported. We cannot take another hit like that. Lisa looked at the tactical display. They had damaged the significantly, but its weapons were still operational. Not enough. They had not done enough. She made her decision. All remaining ships, this is Morgan, ramming speed. Target the main weapon clusters, maximum impact. There were no objections. Every remaining commander understood. This was always how it was going to end. Lisa aimed the Valiant directly at her target and pushed the engines to full power. The ship accelerated, faster and faster, until it was moving at a significant fraction of light speed. At that velocity, the Valiant was no longer just a ship. It was a kinetic weapon of unimaginable power. The impact lasted less than a second. The Valiant struck this main weapons cluster and penetrated deep into the dreadnought's hull. The energy released by the collision was equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. 4 more Raptors followed Lisa's example, each one striking a different section of the massive vessel. The combined impacts tore through the weapon systems, destroying the planet-killing weapons that had been its primary purpose. Only one Raptor survived the attack. Lieutenant Shaw, commanding the footage of the attack played on screens across 300 star systems. In the Empire, citizens watched in shock as their ultimate weapon, the symbol of their invincibility, was crippled by 6 small human ships. In subject territories, populations saw that the mighty could be defeated, and in the corridors of power, everything began to fall apart. Supreme Commander stood before the High Command, but his authority was crumbling. Around the table, military officers who had once followed his every command now looked at him with doubt and barely concealed contempt. The humans destroyed one admiral said flatly. They sent 6 ships on what should have been a suicide mission, and those 6 ships accomplished what they set out to do. Meanwhile, we have lost nearly half our active fleet trying to enforce demands that were foolish from the beginning. I acted to preserve the Empire's strength, protested. You acted out of pride, Commander said quietly. And that pride has cost us dearly. Reports are coming in from across the Empire. The system has declared independence. The colonies are in open rebellion. Our economy is collapsing because trade routes are too dangerous to patrol with our reduced fleet. Supreme Commander, you must step down. I will not surrender my position to anyone, growled. Then you will be removed, Grand Admiral said, rising from his seat. The Military Council has voted. Your command is terminated, effective immediately. Commander will assume temporary leadership until a new government can be established. Looked around the table, seeing no support, no loyalty, only the cold reality of failed leadership. He had led the Empire to the brink of disaster, and now he would pay the price. Without another word, he turned and left the chamber. Took the seat at the head of the table with no sense of triumph, only exhaustion. Our first priority must be to stabilize the Empire. We need to recall our forces, secure our borders, and restore order. But before we can do any of that, we must end this war with humanity. You mean surrender? An officer asked. I mean negotiate, replied. The humans never wanted conquest. They wanted respect for their boundaries. We can give them that at no real cost to ourselves, and in doing so we may salvage what remains of the Empire. On Earth, Admiral Hayes stood in the memorial garden that had been constructed on the grounds of Defense Command Headquarters. Before him was a wall of names, each one representing a person who had died defending humanity. Captain Lisa Morgan's name was near the top of the section, along with the names of the 247 other volunteers who had given their lives to stop the... They saved us all, President Foster said, standing beside him. Every person on Earth owes them a debt we can never repay. They knew what they were signing up for, Hayes replied quietly. Every one of them volunteered. They believed that some things are worth dying for. Foster nodded. I received a message this morning. They have requested formal negotiations. Commander has taken control of their government and wants to discuss peace terms. Do you trust him? I trust that he is pragmatic, Foster said. The Empire is falling apart. They need peace more than we do. The question is, what terms should we offer? Hayes considered for a moment. We should offer them the same thing we wanted from the beginning, recognition of our boundaries, mutual respect, a formal treaty that prevents future conflicts, and we should offer humanitarian aid to help stabilize their territory. A stable empire is better for everyone than a power vacuum that could lead to decades of chaos. You would help the people who tried to destroy Earth. I would help ensure that this war never happens again, Hayes said. Vengeance feels good in the moment, but it creates the conditions for the next conflict. If we can turn an enemy into a neutral power or even an eventual ally, that is worth more than any amount of revenge. 2 weeks later, Ambassador returned to the capital for the first time since he had delivered the original warning. This time, however, the atmosphere was completely different. He was not standing alone in a council chamber being mocked. He was seated at a negotiating table with Commander and a team of diplomats who treated him with careful respect. Ambassador began, I want to start by acknowledging the mistakes my people made. We underestimated humanity. We treated your warnings with contempt, and we paid a terrible price for our arrogance. I am here to ensure that such mistakes are never repeated. Nodded, Commander, humanity bears no ill will toward the people. We understand that this war was driven by decisions made by your leadership, not by the desires of your population. We are prepared to offer reasonable terms that will allow both our peoples to coexist peacefully. The negotiations lasted for 3 days. Worked closely with Agent Bradford, whose intelligence network proved invaluable in understanding the internal politics of the government. They identified moderate factions that could be strengthened through the treaty terms, ensuring that peaceful approach would have lasting support. The final treaty was remarkably simple. The Empire formally recognized all human territory with clearly defined boundaries. Both sides agreed not to cross those boundaries without explicit permission. They would release any human prisoners and withdraw military forces from border regions. In exchange, humanity would provide food aid, medical supplies, and technical assistance to help the Empire restore stability. There was one additional provision that insisted upon. A cultural exchange program would be established, allowing citizens from both sides to study each other's history, culture, and way of life. Understanding, argued, was the foundation of lasting peace. On the day the treaty was signed, stood with on a platform overlooking the capital. Crowds had gathered below, a mixture of citizens and representatives from various subject species. There was no celebration, no triumphant declarations, only a quiet acknowledgement that a terrible conflict had finally ended. My people have learned a hard lesson, said. Power without wisdom leads only to destruction. Humanity taught us that lesson at great cost. Both our peoples paid a price, replied. The question now is what we do with the peace we have built. 6 months after the treaty was signed, a memorial station was completed at the original boundary of Terran space. The station served multiple purposes. It was a customs point where ships could request permission to cross into human or territory. It was a trade hub where merchants from both sides could conduct business, and it was a monument to all who had died in the conflict. Admiral Hayes attended the dedication ceremony alongside Commander. They stood before a large marker that had been inscribed in both human and languages. The message was simple but powerful. Boundaries respected are wars prevented. I hope future generations will remember what happened here, said. I hope they will understand that pride and arrogance lead only to suffering. They will remember if we teach them properly, Hayes replied. That is why the cultural exchange program is so important. The next generation needs to learn from our mistakes. As part of the exchange program, several young officers had been accepted into Earth's military academy. Among them was the same officer who had been rescued by human forces after the electromagnetic pulse attack. He now studied human military history with intense focus, trying to understand how such a small force had defeated the mighty Empire. His instructor was retired Commander Jack Torres, one of the few survivors of the early battles. Jack had left active service after the war, choosing instead to teach the next generation about the realities of warfare. Commander Torres asked during one lesson, how did humanity develop such effective strategies against us? We had more ships, better weapons, superior technology, yet we lost nearly every engagement. Jack smiled slightly. You lost because you made assumptions. You assumed that numbers meant everything. You assumed that your technology was superior in all ways that mattered. And most importantly, you assumed that your way of thinking about warfare was the only valid approach. But how did you know our assumptions would be wrong? Pressed. Because we studied you, Jack replied. For 18 months before your first fleet entered Terran space, we analyzed every piece of technology we could acquire. We studied your tactics from previous wars. We identified patterns in how your commanders thought and how your systems operated. And then we built our defenses specifically to exploit your weaknesses while avoiding your strengths. He pulled up a tactical display showing the first battle. When your fleet entered our space, you expected to face us in open combat, ship against ship, weapon against weapon. That is how they have always fought, but we did not give you that battle. We disabled your ships and then struck when you could not defend yourselves. We made your strengths irrelevant. Studied the display with new understanding. You made Terran space forbidden not because you wanted isolation, but because you turned it into a battlefield designed specifically to counter our forces. Exactly, Jack confirmed. We could not beat you in a conventional war, so we refused to fight a conventional war. We created conditions where our advantages in preparation, intelligence, and adaptive thinking outweighed your advantages in numbers and technology. And the sacrifices, said quietly. Captain Morgan and her crew, they gave their lives to stop the when nothing else could. In the military, we would call that wasteful, throwing away valuable personnel on a mission with such low survival probability. Jack's expression grew serious. They were not thrown away. They volunteered knowing the cost. They believed that saving Earth was worth their lives. That kind of commitment, that willingness to sacrifice everything for something larger than yourself, that is one of humanity's greatest strengths. It is also something that cannot be measured in battle simulations or tactical assessments. The lesson continued, but found himself thinking about Jack's words long after the session ended. He had come to Earth expecting to learn about weapons and tactics. Instead, he was learning about the values and beliefs that made those weapons and tactics effective. One evening, he stood on an observation deck looking out at Earth. The planet was beautiful, a sphere of blue and green spinning slowly in space. Millions of people down there going about their lives, never knowing how close they had come to destruction. Agent Bradford joined him at the window. She had been assigned as a liaison for the exchange students, helping them adjust to human culture. "It is a nice view," she said. "Your planet is very different from the," replied. "More water, softer colors, it seems peaceful." "It is peaceful now," said. "But 6 months ago it was nearly destroyed. That is why memorials like the one at the boundary station are so important. They remind us what peace costs." "Agent Bradford, may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Do you think our peoples can truly be at peace? Or will old hatreds and resentments lead to another conflict in the future?" Thought for a moment before answering. "I think peace is always a choice. It requires both sides to choose understanding over hatred, cooperation over conflict. The treaty we signed is just paper. The real peace has to be built by people like you and me, by soldiers who choose to study together rather than fight, by merchants who trade rather than raid, by citizens who see each other as fellow beings rather than enemies." "That will not be easy," observed. "No," agreed. "It will not be easy, but the alternative is another war, more death, more suffering. And I think we have all had enough of that." Nodded slowly. He looked out at Earth one more time, then turned back toward the academy. He had studies to complete, lessons to learn, not just about warfare, but about peace. In the command center on Earth, Admiral Hayes reviewed the latest reports with satisfaction. Trade between human and territories was increasing. The cultural exchange programs were expanding. Several other species in the region had requested similar boundary agreements with humanity, seeing the value in clearly defined and mutually respected borders. President Foster joined him in the command center. "The Galactic Council has officially invited us to join as full members. They say our approach to conflict resolution and boundary establishment has become a model for other species." "That is good news," Hayes said. "But we should remember that the galaxy is large and full of unknowns. There were one challenge, there will be others." "True," Foster agreed. "But we have proven something important. We have proven that a smaller power can defend itself against a larger one through intelligence, strategy, and the willingness to pay the necessary price. We have proven that boundaries matter and that respect is earned, not given. And we have proven that even after a brutal conflict, peace is possible if both sides are willing to work for it." Hayes looked at the star map on the wall, showing human territory marked in blue, territory in red, and the neutral zone between them in green. "Terran space is forbidden," he said quietly. "We made it that way through blood and sacrifice, but the goal was never isolation. The goal was respect, and now we have it." "Let us hope," Foster said, "that we have taught the galaxy a lesson that will last." Far above Earth on the memorial station, the marker continued its silent vigil. Its message remained unchanged, a reminder and a warning to all who passed by. Boundaries respected are wars prevented. The war between humanity and the Empire had ended. The peace that followed was built on hard-won understanding and mutual respect. And throughout the galaxy, other species looked at the small blue planet and the boundaries surrounding it, and they remembered the lesson humanity had taught with such terrible effectiveness. Some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. Some warnings are not meant to be ignored. And underestimating an opponent's determination, preparation, and willingness to defend what is theirs is the path to defeat. Terran space remained forbidden, but now, finally, it was respected. And that respect, purchased with sacrifice and maintained through strength tempered with mercy, was the foundation upon which a new era of peace was built. S. Fury pulled away from the crippled dreadnought with his ship badly damaged, but intact. He immediately began transmitting footage of the engagement on all frequencies. The message that accompanied the footage was simple. This is Lieutenant Shaw of the Earth Defense Forces that has been disabled. Its weapons are destroyed. Any further attack on Earth will be met with the same response. We gave you warning. We gave you chances to turn back. You chose this path. Remember what it cost you. The message and the footage of 6 small ships crippling the Empire's ultimate weapon spread across the galaxy within hours, and everything began to change. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but held his ground. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Humanity had found a way to defeat the Empire without matching them in numbers or technology. They had simply made the cost of aggression too high to bear. And far away on Earth, Admiral Hayes reviewed the same calculations and came to his own conclusion. They would be back. Pride and fear would drive them to one final, desperate gamble. Hayes needed to be ready when that moment came. Chose not to believe us. Your fleet entered our territory and we defended our boundaries. We have returned your survivors unharmed and treated according to the standards of civilized warfare. We have returned your ships to demonstrate that we seek no conquest. But understand this clearly, Terran space remains forbidden. We have made it a killing ground specifically designed to counter your technology. Any future incursions will meet the same fate. Stay out of our space and we will have peace. Cross our boundaries again and you will face destruction. The choice is yours. The message ended, but its impact was only beginning. Raised and weapons ready, they were expecting a fight. They were prepared for human ships to meet them, for missiles and energy weapons to fill the space between the fleets. They were not prepared for what actually happened. They have reached the midpoint, Lisa reported. All platforms are in optimal position. Hayes took one final look at the display, then gave the order that would change everything. Execute Protocol Redline, activate the suppression field, deploy all defensive units, show them why Terran space is forbidden. Lisa's fingers moved across her control panel, inputting the commands that had been programmed and tested 100 times. Protocol Redline is active, field generators at full power, deploying defensive units now. And in the cold darkness of space, the trap closed on the Empire's finest fleet.